Good afternoon. Welcome to the People's University of Woodford Square. I'm Joseph Berment McDowald, and with us today is Mr. WillisBurris, who is an economist and a consultant in the area of business and finance. He's worked with both international agencies and also with large American corporations. A Tobagonian by birth who has migrated from Tobago or left Tobago 28 years ago. His first stop was in Trinidad, then in the United States of America, in New York, eventually to Haifa in Israel, now residing in Miami. A recently published author of a book called The Man I Love and Me. But today we are not talking about Mr. Burris's community life solely. We're not talking about the relationship that he had with his family and his community in Tobago. We're talking about the area of his special expertise and training. Thank you very much for being here, Mr. Burris.
Thank you, Mr. Berment. It's a pleasure to be with you today and to participate in the University of Woodford Square, the People's University.
Thank you. Mr. Burris, one of the things that a question that I asked myself on the way here as we were speaking is the issue of Cuba. Tobago sells sun, sand, sea. Cuba has a mystic allure because of its isolation over the past 50-odd years or so. And it wouldn't be unreasonable for one to anticipate a second song in terms of tourist arrivals if and when, and I suppose it's imminent, the Cuban market opens up. How do you think Tobago should respond to this challenge successfully?
Well, it's obvious. When you have a product as the natural resources that we have in Tobago, you have the beautiful beaches, the luxuriant rainforests, the pristine rivers, just the landscape, the people. You market your product for its uniqueness. And no matter what the allure or the pull of Cuba is as a new tourist location that's been opened up, if the planners in Trinidad and Tobago market Tobago for its uniqueness, we also need to look at neighboring tourism. So Tobago can also make a stronger emphasis on neighboring tourism, which includes Trinidad to Tobago tourism, Venezuelan, Brazilian, the countries that are in the neighborhood, which is much easier and closer for them to get to Tobago. And before you know it, if you market Tobago effectively in the region, in the neighborhood, you wouldn't have enough hotels and motels to put people up. So you would see the generation of revenue, foreign exchange, multifold, exponentially, just by marketing effectively in the neighborhood. It doesn't mean that the European market or the American market that has traditionally been a source of tourism revenue for Tobago would be ignored. But you're going to do a multi-pronged marketing strategy so that your uniqueness as a country, your safety, your beauty, whatever we have, you market that effectively in the neighborhood, in the wider region, and you would have a type of economic development taking place in Tobago, both at the corporate levels in terms of large hotels and in the more localized level with small entrepreneurs who want to enter the market to have a little hotel, have a restaurant, have a spa, have health facilities, the wonderful music and talent we have, the local, what is displayed every year in the Tobago Festival, the Blue Food Festival that was just on Sunday. We have so many unique ways of attracting tourists that it's almost limitless.
I suppose as you gave the reply, what comes to mind instantly is one could sell Tobago as being a small location, all things being equal, where you can have a multiplicity of different experiences all in one place, as opposed, let us say, to traveling to Venezuela, where you go to one part of Venezuela, there's a completely different kind of topography and geography from another. In Tobago, you can have that eclectic mix of various natural and other experiences within an easy radius.
Exactly.
And that could be, but do you believe, Mr. Burris, that the major constraint is marketing? Or are there other drags or limiters affecting the ability of Tobago tourism to reach its potential? And the tone of the discussion we have taken is that the economy of Tobago is going to be driven by tourism. How about other prospects? So I'm going to hold you to answer other prospects for economic growth, one, and two, what are the limiters apart from marketing? Because if it were only for marketing, so if we did a perfect job of marketing, would that be the end of?
It definitely wouldn't be. When you do any kind of planning, particularly strategic economic planning, you must have a long-term view. You must have a vision of where you want to be in a specific or long-term period of time. So if you want to plan something like tourism development, you must look at least 20 years down the road, 30 years down the road. That would be the minimum view if you want to do an effective tourism development plan. And in that plan, you must identify what product, where you want to be as a tourist destination. Would you be the tourist destination for nightclubs, for spas, for nature walks, for bird watching? Tobago has the ability, the capacity, the inherent bounties of marketing a variety of tourist attractive products in a small physical environment. So that's one of its advantages. You can have the beach, you can have the mountains, you can have the bird watching, you can have the entertainment, you have the nice hotels. So within a small geography, you have the ability to market this multiplicity of tourist attractions. Now, as I said, the key is the vision. You want to plan for Tobago 20 years from now. So you're looking at 2035, 2040, 2050. What kind of a product are we marketing Tobago as? And you do not have to limit yourself. Not only tourism sector, as you mentioned, but this is the time when Tobago, because of the academic prowess of so many of its students and sons and daughters, this is the time when you can market Tobago as a center of learning in certain fields, in certain non-polluting fields, in economics, in business, in tourism, in marketing, even in engineering, and fields that we are not fully developed in yet. But if we have the technicians who can teach those courses, we can develop a unique, what I would call, 2-year college, which is like one of the best ways of training people who are going to be technologists in the field. You have an associate's degree in these technological fields. Tobago is a hot place. Everybody needs nice air conditioning. When you're off the beach, you want to get home or get to your room and be in a nice air-conditioned place. So you want to develop air-conditioned technicians. You want to have great plumbers. You want to have great electricians. You want to have wonderful masons. So if you have an effective development strategy, 20 to 30 years down, and you identify the markers that you want to have at that point, you slowly start building that up. So it's not only tourism. I see Tobago as a mecca of learning, where you can first start with the associate's degrees programs in those fields where the people can immediately be employed, developing the country.
The rainforest in Tobago, that ridge in the middle of the island, part of which you lived on as a young boy.
Close to. We can see the mountains just like 2 miles with the crow fly, and I've been there many times. It's really great.
That's one of the earliest protected rainforests or forest preserves in the New World. That's quite a resource, isn't it?
Yes, the rainforest in Tobago is really wonderful. It runs for almost 2/3 of the island from, even just outside the outskirts of Scarborough. As you get into Mason Hall, you start getting up into the highlands, and then the mountains go all the way up to Charlottesville. And it's, in the top enclave of the mountain is the forest preserve. People own lands outside the preserve. I actually own quite a few acres just outside the preserve. I border with the preserve.
The Germans used to learn about Tobago, I think, in elementary school. The legend of Robinson Crusoe was taught in school. The first time I met a German traveler to Trinidad and Tobago, it was because of that mystique that was inculcated in school. Do you have any idea if that is still part of the curriculum in Germany?
I don't know if it's part of the curriculum, but it's part of Caribbean mythology of this Robinson Crusoe island. And then we ended up having this wonderful son by the name of Arthur Napoleon Raymond Robinson. So even though he was not part of the mystique or the legend, he became a living legend for not only Tobago, but for Trinidad and Tobago.
Maybe a museum for A&R Robinson and Tobago?
Oh,
and other illustrious sons of Tobago?
Yeah, you seem to be quite the economist yourself, coming up with entrepreneurial ideas that would help promote the culture and history of the country. So there's a multiplicity of ways in which we can identify certain products and services that Tobago will and can provide that would distinguish it from many countries in the world, and therefore earn the kind of revenue that would make every Tobagonian a wealthy, comfortable person in that 20 to 30 year vision. And that's my personal vision for Tobago and for the world, because I've written my Vision 2050 statement that everyone can look at my website, WillisBurris.org. It's called Vision 2050. And in that, you would get ideas as to how to plan your own life and to vision a future that would be abundantly blessed with economic development and educational opportunities. Because education, whether it's the aristocratic bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD, it's good, but I am also very concerned about technological education, which is at the associate's degree level, and the trade level, because these are the people who actually build an economy. And most of my brothers, that's the fields that they were in. When I came to Trinidad, I worked with my eldest brother, Utley, who was a master plumber. He studied plumbing by correspondence course, then he worked with Water and Sewerage Authority, then he went to John S. Donaldson Technical Institute, then on to Canada and became a master plumber working in all fields and that kind of stuff. Then he came back and used his skills here in Trinidad and Tobago. I left the bank, came and worked with him, and we did some of the major projects in Trinidad at the time, the Trin City Shopping Mall. We had that entire contract. The Royal Bank Tower on Independence Square, now Brian Lara Promenade. We did the plumbing installation for that. Abma Investment Building on Abercrombie Street. The Coover, TNTech, you name it. We were there, but who was leading that? A technician. A guy who didn't even have a school-even certificate, but he never gave up his vision to make himself something. This was a man, a rural man. He was a hunter.
Well, one of the things that you're saying there is important, but I believe under-recognized in Trinidad and Tobago. The capacity of people to arrive at a certain depth of knowledge, a certain expression of skill and ability by learning in ways that are different from the traditional way of teaching in Trinidad and Tobago. And maybe that may be a possibility for Tobago, introducing those new. As an award-winning teacher yourself, I'm sure you're very aware of the possibilities. I remember looking at Michelle Rhee on Teach America when she was involved with the Washington, D.C. School Board, and the challenges and opportunities that she had to contend with.
Sure.
And our own society, I think the overemphasis on the O-level route, the A-level route, at the expense of any other opportunity you want to, or potential, I should say, or possibility.
I think for too long we have been fed this type of educational system in which it has to be the aristocratic, the O-level, the A-level, the bachelor's degree, that kind of a route. We have not emphasized training in the trades, in the technologies, in the arts, in the crafts, in the steel drum. That is our thing. Every school, from primary through high school.
We should have an institute of the steel band.
We should have it. We should have it.
Giving accreditation based, for instance, on how they make violins in Italy, in Cremora, where you apprentice to a master for 5 years. And a violin could cost as much as, I think, 26,000 euro.
Yeah.
You know?
This is our culture. Why isn't it being taught in every school in Trinidad and Tobago? Why, after spending 7 years in elementary and 7 years in high school, I have never learned to play the steel pan? I'm an African drummer now. I learned that over the years that I've been in Israel and the US, and I'm a master drummer now. But I still cannot play my own cultural steel pan. Something is therefore deficient in our education system. These are simple changes that the ministry could make and say, we are going to have steel drums in every school. That is another source of employment for the people who know how to play the pan, the people who can tune it. It's a whole industry.
So it's an industry that can attract export income.
Definitely.
So I remember you were telling me about going to Mr. Elder's economics class. Was that at O or A levels? It was
at the A levels, here, right here, close by in
you did it
St.
in Tranquility?
James. Yeah, Tranquility,
Tranquility.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, someone doesn't go to Mr. Elder's economics class having had a instruction at the O levels and obtain an MBA in international economics without having an economic vision that's detailed and complex for the place that one comes from. And in as few words as the time would allow us, I suppose we'll probably have to maybe we could begin and we take a break. Tell us, what is your vision of Tobago? If you can paint a picture, what should it look like? What ought to be happening in Tobago apart from the skills training, apart from the credentialization and the normal university and the technical university or colleges? What should the economy and what kind of economic activity would you be expecting to see?
It has to be a combination of all of what you've said and what I've shared earlier. You're not going to develop a modern economy with one or two drivers. You have to cover all the bases. And first, any economy needs infrastructure development, and that in small semi-socialist economies like the ones we have in Trinidad and Tobago, where a lot of the capital is provided by government financing, which is a semi-socialist system, you have to have the development of the infrastructure. Not only the roads, but efficient telephones, regular supply of electricity, water that doesn't get cut off every day. All of those infrastructure things have to be fully functional in order to then encourage the private sector and other public-private partnerships to take place.
How about the institutions and the growth of institutions? Apparently, from reading your book, it would seem that the primary institution in society in Tobago is working relatively well, at least better than the generality of Trinidad and Tobago, especially among people of African ancestry. So what about the other institutions, the institutions under community control, under public control, the state institutions, the local government institutions, and other private institutions? What should they look like? What ought they to be doing better?
Well, any organization or any person should be trying to get better every day, like myself.
So we have to take a break.
Yes.
The news is going to be on us, or the news hour is on us. So we'll continue speaking about the institutions of growth, how to finesse growth in Tobago when we resume. So this is the end of part one for the People's University of Woodford Square, and the news will be shortly.
Good afternoon and thank you for staying with us here on Access News. Let's take a quick check on what's making headlines. Rural Development Minister Franklin Kahn details plans for rural development in the Senate this afternoon. The Agriculture Ministry to move to central Trinidad in January 2016. Doctors in silent protest at San Fernando General Hospital over H1N1 cases. The government signals its intention to go after private members' clubs. The American Chamber of Commerce of Trinidad and Tobago says online shopping tax a bad idea, and the father of an 11-month-old boy who died while at daycare is now pleading with parents to be more attentive to their children. We'll have more details for you in just under half an hour's time. Stay with us here on Access News.
Welcome back to the People's University of Woodford Square. With us today is WillisBurris, who's an economist by training, a financial and business consultant, who is a recent author of a recently published book, The Man I Love and Me. We've discussed this book with Mr. Burris on a previous program. Today we are talking about Tobago. Mr. Burris was born in Tobago. He left Tobago 28 years ago, migrated to Trinidad, migrated further to New York, migrated, or I would say, went to work in Israel in an international organization, went back to the United States, and was a financial controller in Florida, a prize-winning teacher, a recent author, a born and bred Tobagonian, and we're happy to have him here today. Thank you again.
Thank you, Mr. Berment.
If I could call you Willis, may I?
Please, please.
So
that's the name my mother gave me.
We're talking about what Tobago needs to look like, and what Tobago needs to do in order to become competitive and to hold its own and to grow its potential in a global competitive market. We were talking about the institutional arrangements. We're beginning with the assumption that the patterns of family life in Tobago are generally what they ought to be. Is that a correct presumption to make?
You know, I wouldn't pretend to know everything that is happening in Tobago because, as I've said, I've been gone for 28 years. I am in touch with family members every week, and I also read the newspapers every week. And you read the
Tobago news?
Yes, online.
And you listen to the Tobago news? Do they have an online feed?
Sometimes I listen to Radio Tambourine, yes, because they have an internet feed, and other stations in Trinidad also, sometimes just to get a little flavor of the music and the culture. But definitely the newspapers I try to read every week, whether it's Express, Guardian, Tobago News. So, but I wouldn't still, because I'm not living in the country, pretend to know the nuances of what is going on the ground. That would be presumptuous of me to try to even do that.
But what has struck you in the 28 years that you've been absent as such? What changes have struck you?
Well, there is what I would call incremental development, and any step forward or any type of economic progress is welcome and should be praised and supported. But I think that we have to do more in a modern time like this. We need to do more. The institutions of state have to be more responsive to the needs of the population and to provide the infrastructure that is needed so that people can become more effective entrepreneurs and business people. And the young people who are coming up have more opportunities right in Tobago to be able to learn a trade effectively, to get an associate's degree that would make them technicians, whether it's in computers, whether it's in, as I said earlier, in air conditioning, in electrical, wiring and lighting, and plumbing, all the technologies. We need to have institutions right in Tobago, at least at the associate's degree level, that can provide that training so that the people of Tobago, the young people and even people who are older who want to learn something new, have the training so that they can immediately go into the workforce, either work for a company or the government, or become business owners themselves, contractors. You know, that is what the education system needs to be updated to meet the needs of a vision for Tobago. And a vision in terms of its tourism development, its agricultural development, its preservation of its waters and the rainforest, and that competitive edge that we can achieve by creating a university system in Tobago that is unique for Tobago, that will attract students from the region and even international students who would want to study in an environment that a place like Tobago provides.
So would you say that the problem with education and training in Tobago is that it's not sufficiently focused towards an objective or towards the island goals in Tobago?
I think that can be said. We need an education system, not only the high schools, which is great. I'm not condemning anything that we have. I'm just suggesting that we need to provide a tertiary education system that is focused and geared on the long-term development needs of the island. And that's not just Tobago, but Trinidad and Tobago. And that's a model that can be used globally. And, you know, because I'm an international economics, I understand how these things can be replicated. You have to look at your you know, what they call in pure economics, do you have an absolute advantage?
Comparative advantage.
Yeah, or is it a comparative or a least comparative advantage in providing something? That is where you can then facilitate international trade. Because if we are able to develop a unique education system in Tobago that becomes world renowned, and it has to be non-polluting, you know, it has to be renewable, sustainable education system. It would attract people in the region and it would attract people globally. Then we will have housing development, hotel development. It would be a whole panoply of activity that is exponentially growing. But you have to have leaders who have the vision and can plan long term for the island's well-being. Not people who are just concerned about, you know, the next meal, as they say now. The new talk is eat a food mentality. You have to have people that are visionaries and planners. Our family were a family of visionaries and planners. That's why we have done the things that we have done as a family over the years. You look at any one of us in the list of names in the family. Not everybody is straight. We have some characters in the family, but
when you come from a large family, you can hardly avoid them.
Yeah, but everyone is either a trained technician or an intellectual.
So tell me, would you say that the central government or the governments have given Tobago its fair share in the last 28 years or not?
As I said again, because I'm not here and been looking at budgetary allocations, I wouldn't want to say yes or no to a question like that.
Have you been to Tobago, to Toco?
No, the closest I've gone to out there is Sangre Grande and Valencia. I've never actually been to the village of Toco or the town of Toco, what do you call it? Yeah.
I've been traveling to Toco for the last 35 years.
Yeah.
It used to have a gas station in the middle of Toco. It has none now.
Okay.
There used to be a general shop that had some measure of serviceability. It's closed and derelict. And if you go around Toco, there used to be, I don't know whether the magistrate's court has returned to Toco. I believe that the magistrate's court was closed.
What you're suggesting is that using Toco as an example, you've seen economic decline or infrastructure decline?
And both economic and infrastructure.
Yeah,
and what one wonders is if it's the focus of the central government, that the central government has been somewhat either blind to any and every rural community in Trinidad and Tobago. And maybe some of the politics, the negative politics that feeds back, is more as a consequence of that that there's a kind of city focus by default, almost invariably, that seems to be raise issues of equity, distribution, and development.
Well, that could be, part of the overemphasis on centralized planning. That could be a deficiency of the emphasis on centralized planning, keeping everything in the big cities and stuff like that. For me, as an economist, I know that you have to spread the resources. You have to be able to keep populations where they are by providing them the needs that they require.
Well, we could look back in hindsight and say that maybe our early fathers of the nation made a cardinal mistake in not creating those conditions where it would have been optimum for people to stay in their villages and communities. A lot of our social problems, especially in the East-West corridor, and economic problems ultimately, were caused by the massive urbanization, where people found it necessary to move to Port of Spain or maybe San Fernando. Yes. Maybe even to move to Scarborough. Yeah. Although I've never seen a slum in the outskirts of Scarborough. Yeah. Is there one?
No. It's generally, middle class development. I mean, there's a variety of housing structures, a few wooden houses and stuff, but most of the houses is concrete construction, solid construction. There's no particular slum area in Scarborough, thank God for that. And I guess it's part of just the culture of Tobagonians always wanting to own their own homes and improving it and stuff like that.
But doesn't everyone want that? The circumstances that they dealt with, the availability of land, issues of tenure, issues of occupancy rights, issues of income, and issues of sociology, the kind of community and family relations that is the hand that one is dealt with, that makes that more or less possible.
It comes back to vision. As it's said in Proverbs, everyone or most people know this statement: where there is no vision, the people perish. Yes. It's not there because it's a nice slogan, it's there because it's true and it has meaning. If you have a country where you have things like mangoes that ripe by the thousands each year, and we were promised like umpteen years ago that not another mango would go rotten, and government after government, still no one sets up a mango factory to juice these mangoes and to make different products, whether it's the pure mango juice, whether it's ice cream, whether it's mango cakes. Let the culinary people come in and be creative. But we first have to harvest the mangoes and produce more mangoes so that it's not wasted. That's a whole industry that can be developed in Trinidad and Tobago that is going to be unique to Trinidad and Tobago. TNT mango, mango juice, mango ice cream, mango cakes, you name it. That is an industry because the mangoes have so many varieties and they are so delicious. So that one product in the agriculture sector alone can create synergy within the agricultural development of Trinidad and Tobago. It's not very difficult. When I was in Israel, when the people picked the olives, they had a huge net that they would spread under the tree, and they would go and shake the trees, and then all the olives will come down, and then they just gather it in the net. We can do a similar net for mangoes. Go shake the mango trees, make nets, catch all the mangoes, because some of them are over steep cliffs, so you can't really get to them easily. But if you're able to develop a net where you shake them down and they fall into the net, then you could harvest so much more mangoes.
Well, you've just said something that's important. You saw this in Israel, and it gave you an idea that relates to how you can alter your circumstances in Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
And I've always marveled at how we spend maybe billions of dollars recently per annum in overseas travel. We send our leadership, our technicians, our administrators abroad, and they seem to come back totally void of ideas to apply to the society that they live in. At least we don't see those ideas applied. or those ideas are not facilitated to give seed and to grow in some fertile soil. Have you ever made that observation?
Well, as I said, because I'm outside, I cannot claim to be, I wouldn't say an active observer, but a practical observer of what is happening in Trinidad and Tobago. Because my reports are usually from media, reading the papers, and a lot of times as a writer myself, and I'm one who has seen thousands of reports and letters and memos and messages, I know how the author of something can twist and alter it to suit their own perception or whatever they want to convey. I'm also, as an accountant, I know what the people do to the numbers. What you learn in college when you go and become an accountant for a company, some of the stuff that you have to do to produce financial reports is not the things that you learn in college. So it's the same thing. Writers,
no, it's not the stuff you learn in Sunday school.
yeah. Writers can always alter information, but in terms of whether these experts get a chance to look at other systems outside of Trinidad and Tobago and are able to adopt things that would be useful for us, that is a matter of that person or the institution that they're working for, whether when they go out for training or if they go on missions and conferences, whether they're really interested in learning and bringing back stuff, or they're just there to have a good time and enjoy the hotels and the facilities. So that is it's a personal responsibility. That's why companies and governments need to hire people with integrity, people who tell the truth, and people who can serve the nation. If you want to be a public servant, you should be there to serve others, not yourself.
Have you ever wondered about the size of the central and local government in the economy of Tobago? Do you think that is sustainable and or healthy?
Yeah, well, I've seen quite a few reports on that recently where they say so many people work for the Tobago House of Assembly that it even crowds out employment or
private
personnel.
Entrepreneurialism.
Private
entrepreneurialism.
Yep, exactly. Are crowded out because the government is paying well and is taking most of the people with the skills.
Well, not only is it paying well, frequently it's demanding less than it ought to, and it's managing poorly. So it sets a benchmark for what output and productivity should be. And people's reservation wage climbs. If you get $100, and no one does, for working 2 hours a day, your reservation wage becomes $50 an hour. And people are absolutely reluctant to do anything. It is
unsustainable to continue running a country where you're paying people 8 hours of money and you're only getting 2 hours, if you're lucky, 3 hours worth of productivity. A time will come when that subsidy will no longer be sustainable. And I think we are at that point where we are starting to realize, with the decline in our foreign exchange, with the decline of oil and gas prices and our ability to generate foreign reserves through the traditional drivers of the economy, we will have to start doing things differently. We will have to work more hours so that we can develop the infrastructure of the country, so that when people come, they would want to come back because the water is running, the lights are on, the roads are smooth, and the people, which is always what it ends up being, the people are happy and welcoming and friendly, and they want to be in Trinidad and Tobago.
At one time, I did a comparison between spending a week at South Miami Beach, spending a week in Tobago. I paid more for the airfare, less for the room, and less for the food. And the total cost was hardly any different. To my mind, that's a serious challenge for Tobago's development. There has to be a way either for me to understand that if I'm going to Tobago, I'm going to get a product that is so eclectic that it's worth double the price of what I would have gotten at Miami, or for the price to come down. Yes. But then Barbados has similar challenge. They have a lot of hotel rooms, I understand, some time ago, half of them were empty because they priced themselves out of the market.
Yeah.
And they've done quite a lot more than we have in terms of selling Barbados.
Oh yes, oh yes. I've been there a couple of times. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Yep.
What do you think is the solution for Tobago? How does it overcome this challenge of price versus product value for money, the value for money proposition?
Well,
And especially, specifically in the tourism market.
the bottom line is being able to give people a product that they are happy with and they would want to return to. Remember, a price of something is only what the buyer and the seller agree to. So you can't say, okay, my room is $50. No. Somebody might be willing to pay you $200 for that so-called $50 room. But the person who is putting out the money, if they are rational, they are putting it out in order to, they must feel that it's worth what they are paying for it. And just being in the environments of Tobago, I just sold one of my books to a British couple who were just bird watching at my friend's hummingbird field, Mr. Junior Thomas. He has a wonderful hummingbird field in Bloody Bay. And this couple, they were there, and I introduced them to my book, and she said, I want to keep this book to remember Tobago when I'm back in England. When it's cold, I want to look at the picture of this book and be able to read it and remember Tobago. So would that couple pay $100 a night to stay in a room where they could just come out and enjoy those hummingbirds? Maybe yes, maybe no. Another couple may only be able to pay $50, but it depends on the utility, as we say in economics, that the investor or the purchaser is getting from the product. And if the utility is good, look at people who drink alcohol. Does it taste good? No. But the fashion, the prestige, you know, the ambiance, they pay hundreds of dollars to have a drink or a bottle of whatever, Chivas Regal, whatever the names are. I don't drink, so I don't know what the names are, but that is what people pay for a product, depend on the utility they think that it brings to them. So if Tobago as a location is a high utility location in terms of the whole package, the atmosphere, the weather, the hotel, the nice service that they get at the airport and in the hotel, they're going to pay big money for it because there are people who have the money and can pay. But
there's a hotel vacancy rate problem that seems to suggest that that either the value has to go up or the price has to come down.
Yeah, well, and if they're going to stay in business, they got to come to the price at a price that a large enough amount. You need to do your occupancy rate and know what price would make you full. If not, then you have to improve your marketing and not, as I said, not just target Americans and Europeans. Do neighborhood marketing. Market more to Trinidad, to Brazil, to those wealthier countries in the region. Instead of them going all the way to North America, to Disney and whatever, you could have a percentage of those people coming to Tobago and to Trinidad, because there's so much to see also in Trinidad.
Well, we just have 5 more minutes to go, and I'm wondering if maybe there's any aspect of Tobago's development, or Trinidad and Tobago's development, national development or island development, that maybe you'd like to speak of in closing. In Tobago, in addition to my emphasis on having an effective associate's degree program for the technologies, the technological trades, that would be a driver for infrastructure development in the island. I also think things like in the entertainment field, like the steel band in all the schools, and water sports. Well, there was a jazz festival.
Sports.
A jazz festival that seems...
it's very successful. So the entertainment field, whether it's the jazz, whether it's the natural local culture that we see in the Tobago Fest and Tobago Heritage Festival, but water sport development, jet skis and stuff like that, in addition to the rainforest, there is just almost a limitless amount of things that you can do to market and promote tourism in Tobago, but it requires the necessary infrastructure to do that.
Were you surprised at the level of social infrastructure and utilities in Tobago in this recent visit?
Yes, I was here. The last 2 years I've been here each year. 2 years ago I was here for a full month. Last year I was here for 2 weeks, and this time I'm here for a month. And the last 2 times the facilities were worse. It was better this time. The water didn't go as often in Palatrovia as it did the last 2 times. The electricity, when it went off, it almost came back. It was just like a surge. So I saw incremental improvement in the water and the electricity. But of course, it's not up to where it should be. It should be full-fledged. And you know, I have ideas that we can use to get that water pumping in the pipes all the time. But you know, they may have to pay for that.
The reasons, well, you're like a former secretary of the THA, Mr. Sandy, who was hired subsequently as a consultant, or threatened to be hired as a consultant for an astronomical salary. You have to answer this in a simple yes or no. I'm sorry, because of the limited time. Do the reasons why you would have left your village in Tobago to come to Trinidad 28 years ago still exist in the main?
Yes, because when I left the village, it was first for high school, and there's still not a high school in Palatrovia or even in any of the neighboring villages.
But you went to high school in Scarborough.
Yes.
I mean, to come to Trinidad.
Well, the move to Trinidad was entrepreneurial.
Okay.
It was a family vision to develop a business with a member who was not a technocrat but a master plumber, and I was asked as a young banker to leave banking and go and support that entrepreneurial idea. And it's all in my book. There's a whole chapter on it, on business success and stagnation, and it's worth reading. It's a lot of information.
WillisBurris, I'd like to thank you very much for being here at the People's University of Woodford Square, and thank you very much for being here today. And I hope that we see you shortly. Yes,
Mr. Berment, I appreciate the privilege and the opportunity to share some of my ideas with my fellow citizens, and I look forward to serving you in whatever way that God destines for me to contribute to the development of my country and the world. I'm a global person. I never limit myself to any physical location, but I'm here to serve.
To you all, good night. Thank you very much for being with us here on the People's University of Woodford Square. I'm Joseph Berment McDowell. Good night.